All right, we are going across now, shifting focus to France. That's where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is presently. Remember, after this visit, is going to be en route the United States of America. But this is an important city. I believe this is in Marseille. He's visiting the War Cemetery. This is very important. This cemetery is not just about French soldiers. It has a very strong India connect. This is the Mazargay War Cemetery in Marseille. Indian soldiers, then, of course, when India was a British colony, hundreds and thousands of Indian soldiers had to be a part and join in the First and the Second World War. And many of these soldiers never returned home. It's homage to them to remember many years later as the Indian Prime Minister heads clearly looking like a cold winter morning. And like we have seen Prime Minister Modi in the past few days, even in France, not ditching the Indian attire. And with French President Emmanuel Macron, this is a somber moment. This is, apart from the AI Action Summit, a big moment for India and France to co-chair. This is beyond meeting the business honchos, but this is about remembering the sacrifice of many soldiers, many of them unnamed, especially who were killed in both the World War I and II, where they were part of. I want to, in fact, quote from how Prime Minister Modi had earlier also said about the valiant contribution of the Indian soldiers. And this visit in Marseille is, remember, we're talking about approximately 900 soldiers who were commemorated here for their efforts, especially in World War I, but also references to World War II have come in. Remember, it was in April 2015 as well that he had paid homage to the Indian soldiers in France. In fact, he was the first Indian Prime Minister to do so. That was in 2015. Then in 2018 also he had spoken about their contribution. Let's listen in and just dip in as there is a guard of honor and a somber ceremony that's presently on. Remember this moment. As per the Indian Council of World Affairs, we are told over 1 million Indian soldiers had served abroad, especially during the World War I. And this was especially the officers who were enlisted in Belgium, in France, 1914 to 1915. 1915, we are in 2025. It's a reminder that we must not forget how many of Indian soldiers were part of that war. In 1914, when the British government had declared war against Germany, that's when infantry divisions, cavalry brigades of the Indian Army, then of course as a British colony, were ordered to be deployed. Remember, in these terrains where our Indian soldiers had served, many of them never returned. It's very important that Prime Minister Modi, even in 2025, taking out a moment from otherwise, which is a business initiative and appealing for investments, to not only go and meet, as he's being briefed about senior officers from the French military, about the history and heritage, but also remember he acknowledged the courageous escape of Veer Savarkar, and that when he was being transported by the sea, how he tried or attempted a brave escape. So Prime Minister Modi making very important symbolic statements here. My colleague Shashank Mattu is joining me for the latest on that. Shashank, it's interesting, and this is not the first time he's acknowledged the contribution and the sacrifice of our soldiers. Tell us more about it.
No, you're absolutely right. Marseille is particularly important in the history of Indian participation in the First World War. Marseille was the main base for the Indian troops fighting in France during the First World War. In fact, in the Mazargay Cemetery, you also have an memorial at the rear of the cemetery for Indian soldiers in the war. I think the Prime Minister at various points in the past has talked about the role that India played in the First World War, a role that is sometimes forgotten in the broader conflict that took place between in the Western world. But of course, he's there. You've seen memorials like this even in Haifa. When he goes to Israel, he talks about Haifa Memorial, as well as those linkages that exist between India and countries from around the world. It shows that we're not two countries on different continents, but we do have also a very, very close relationship. So yes, going to Mazargay, where there is a memorial for Indian soldiers and their contribution in World War I, is extremely important. He's done this in other countries as well, and is establishing and reclaiming a little bit of that history that tends to be forgotten.
So these memorials and war cemetery that he's a part of, I must add here, while most of them, of course, have been unknown, but there have been some known soldiers as well who have a separate memorial in France. They've been acknowledged for their sacrifice in the line of duty. French President Emmanuel Macron putting down a message right now. We saw Prime Minister Modi also, as part of the homage, put a rose. Macron also followed suit. A message by two top leaders of France and India, and to just remember that there's been a connect, not just in the modern times, but ever since the 1914-15 era, that Indian soldiers, and in the manner in which they've contributed. Shashank, what is the part of the itinerary here on? And of course, when does he leave for the United States of America? Because all of this will be part of the schedule.
Well, yes, absolutely. So during the rest of the visit in Marseille, he's expected to visit a port. He's also expected to go see a nuclear power reactor. That, Pooja, is extremely important because one of the key conversations happening between India and France is on the question of nuclear power reactors and getting French companies into India to help meet India's growing energy needs. So manufacturing nuclear power plants and upscaling India's nuclear power generation, that's going to be extremely important. And therefore, Marseille is going to be important for that, both for the port as well as for visiting this atomic energy plant. You're also going to have him then move off to the United States. He's going to fly to America, and he is going to land there on the evening of today. So it is going to be a jam-packed day for the Prime Minister, as he hopefully will look to impress upon France his need for nuclear power, as well as also...
This is an important moment, Shashank, stay on with me. A sort of a guard of honor in itself. It's a ceremonial event that there were these veterans from the French military, possibly who've served in wars and have been associated, of course, with significant developments in France, but they were present. That's where Prime Minister Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron also taking out a moment to acknowledge their contribution. And of course, this is a brief moment, but it symbolizes how to ensure that militaries, these are soldiers who are ready to sacrifice their life in the line of duty, and Prime Minister Modi ensuring that this was part of his itinerary as well, and not just by himself. He is with French President Emmanuel Macron. And I have to also appreciate and admire Prime Minister Modi in the crisp kurta, the pahari topi. He's putting that Indian heritage and attire on display as well as he heads to the war cemetery. So he's interacting, as I see, with other delegates. Shashank, tell me this. So there's an Indian consulate, I believe, also that has to be inaugurated. He's already mentioned Veer Savarkar's brave escape in France.
Yes, that's absolutely right. This is again part of the Prime Minister highlighting some of the earlier political links that the two countries have had with the escape of Veer Savarkar from a ship where he was, of course, being taken by British colonial authorities. But you're right as well, there is going to be the inauguration of India's new consulate in Marseille. India has been expanding its diplomatic footprint really around the world, and of course it has a rather large diaspora in Marseille as well, and therefore to make sure that India's diplomatic representation reaches them, he's also going to be inaugurating this consulate. He's also going to be visiting the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, which is an international nuclear fusion collaboration. So he's going to do all of that, and then he's going to leave for the United States for his next engagement.
All right, so he appears to be now departing from the war cemetery. Remember, it's not just a cemetery, it's also a memorial that honors memory of Indian soldiers. And this ultimate sacrifice in foreign shores, foreign lands, territory that they were completely stranger to, but as part, of course, as part of their duty, they did not flinch even once. Many of them unknown. There have been some known soldiers as well whose names have been mentioned. They have a separate memorial that acknowledges their life journey and sacrifice. So these are the visuals coming in. A band playing the national anthem, both for France and India. And like Shashank is telling us, remember that he's also going to visit the ITER site, the home of International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. I would say, Shashank, that this visit definitely appears to have many layers, isn't it? We were talking business yesterday, AI, Artificial Intelligence Action Summit yesterday. Today we are talking about soldiers. And this reflects of the bond India-France can build onto as well very strongly.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that, as has been said by some of our most distinguished diplomats, France is really our most important strategic partner when it comes to Western Europe. There's a relationship that spans history, defense, as well as nuclear power and so on. It's really been a relationship that has stood the test of time. One of India's really steadfast partners in the Western world. So yes, you're absolutely right. Defense conversations, nuclear power, artificial intelligence, and of course, both countries share a joint commitment to strategic autonomy. It's a phrase that India has and that the French also like when it comes to describing their foreign policy. So there's a meeting of the minds when it comes to India and France.
Shashank, tell me about Macron's relationship equation with Prime Minister Modi. We keep talking about Trump and Modi. How have you seen Macron build his equation with Prime Minister Modi? Because I remember when he came to India a few years ago, remember he talked about how he needs Indian students, appeal to them, they need to come to France. He has been very vocal in his equation with India, and especially Indian Prime Minister. Tell us more about it.
No, in fact, the two leaders now are in many senses very seasoned international statesmen. Prime Minister Modi has been in office since 2014. Emmanuel Macron has headed France since 2017. They are in some senses senior international statesmen now and have met each other a great deal. You know that Prime Minister Modi was the guest of honor at the Bastille Day Parade, which is France's National Day in July 2023. And then India returned the favor and Prime Minister Modi invited him for the Republic Day celebrations in January 2024. You don't just do that for any other a normal world leader. There is obviously a relationship between these two men that has been forged over the last 7 years. And as these two men have taken the roles of international senior statesmen because they've been in office for so long, there is a relationship that has been established here, both from Emmanuel Macron tying him to France, as well tying him to India, as well as from Prime Minister Modi, who went in 2015 as well to France. He's had a relationship with France since he became Prime Minister. So that relationship between these two leaders has been around for the last 7 years.
Also, I want to inform the viewer that right before this visit to the cemetery, the moment he landed in the city of Marseille, he had a social media statement to put. I would just want to quote from here. Landed in Marseille and in India's quest for freedom. This city holds special significance. It was here the great Veer Savarkar attempted a courageous escape. I want to thank the people of Marseille in France and the French activists of that time who demanded that Savarkar not be handed over to British custody. It's the bravery of Savarkar that continues to inspire generations. This is very important. Remember, because it is in this government tenure that we have seen that Savarkar image has now witnessed and more layers have come forth, otherwise just deemed controversial, often dismissed aside. But especially with Prime Minister Modi talking about his brave escape, it adds on to the image and possibly more clarity to who Veer Savarkar really was. Images on your screen. Prime Minister Modi flaunting the Pahadi topi, Himachali topi if I'm correct, and I would love if there's a correction to that, in crisp kurta and churidar that we have seen, he wore at the AI Action Summit, of course, with the French President. And remember, Shashank, I bring you in here, Emmanuel Macron is accompanying him everywhere. I see. It's not that Prime Minister Modi, after the Action Summit, is just onto his own, even at the cemetery, even at other locations. Consistently, it's a Macron-Modi jodi.
No, you're absolutely right. I think Macron understands how important this relationship. He's talked about the importance of the strategic relationship between India and France in the past. If we just sit down and look at what has happened, the two men have chaired the AI Action Summit, which is, of course, big for Macron as well. The Prime Minister is, of course, there to also discuss furthering defense deals between India and France that could be worth potentially billions of dollars. They're also potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars and is perhaps deals on nuclear power plants as well. So Emmanuel Macron understands how important that relationship is. He also knows that he has a very, very strong partnership with Prime Minister Modi that's been built over the last 8 years. And therefore, it just speaks to the fact that, over the course of this visit, they've decided to do these engagements together. It's extremely important. And it speaks again to the partnership between India and France.
So when does he then leave for the United States of America? Shashank, what are you picking up about the rest of the itinerary of the day?
Yes, so he's, as I mentioned, he is expected to go to the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER. It is a nuclear fusion project. It is expected to take place soon after this. He's also expected to open the consulate at Marseille, also visit a port. So that is expected to take a couple of hours before he then heads off to the United States. So it is going to be a very, very packed itinerary. These three quick engagements that he's going to do about opening the consulate, going to ITER, and also visiting Marseille port. So it is going to be a very packed itinerary before he moves off to the United States.
Right, so about a few hours of more packed schedule, and then he will head to the United States of America. Very crucial visit, no rest. Remember, USA is going to be very important. This time there are some concerning issues to be discussed. India will have to put its view very clearly. Meanwhile, after the AI Action Summit, interaction with the tech honchos, asking them to invest in India. This is the right time to invest, is what Prime Minister Modi had said. And then to visit and acknowledge the contribution of the soldiers. What do you think, Shashank, is on agenda for Prime Minister Modi? Because while this is, so to say, on the sidelines of the event, do you think there's a certain symbolism, a certain strategy that Prime Minister Modi is looking and is at play here as much for France as for the audience back home in India?
No, you're absolutely right. I think that when it comes to the relationship between India and France, I think the Prime Minister is trying to show that that he is placing front and center India's history, its strategic role in the world that at times in the past, especially when it comes to the First World War, has at times been somewhat neglected. His view is, of course, no, India has always been a power that on the world stage has contributed, has shaped the history of world politics, and therefore highlighting and acknowledging the role of Indian soldiers by going to the Mazargay Cemetery is a very, very powerful reminder of the role that India has played on the world stage in the past that has been sometimes forgotten, but that the Prime Minister now wants to put on center stage. He's done this numerous times when he goes to Israel, when he came to France in 2015 as well. He went to a World War I cemetery to commemorate Indian soldiers. So in line with what he says now, what he wants for India to do, which is take its rightful place back at the center of world politics. He's saying that, look, we've had that role in the past as well, and he wants to highlight that both for foreign audiences as well as for the audience back home in India.
All right, Shashank, so as we play these visuals, stay on with me. This is from the War Cemetery in Marseille, acknowledging the support, laying a wreath for the Indian soldiers. A message that is being penned by Prime Minister Modi. Also, Emmanuel Macron followed it shortly after. And constant discussions. He was being briefed by the senior military officers, and then he heads out possibly to inaugurate the Indian consulate as well. Remember, when you talk about over 1 million soldiers, that means as many families Many of those families never got to see these soldiers again. It's very important. It may have been in 1914, 1915, a different era. But in 2025, to acknowledge, remember, many of these families, and remember their descendants, could be watching this right now. And it's a very important symbolic initiative for the Prime Minister of India to go to France and ensure this is part of the itinerary to remember them. And some of them, like I mentioned, are also known soldiers who have a separate memorial dedicated to them, while many, many would be unknown soldiers from different states of India. We were told from Meerut, from Lahore, which was, of course, then undivided India. So there were different states and cities from where our soldiers were represented and fighting on these foreign shores. Shashank, so tell us what is the key takeaway then for us of this visit to France? 2 days, but looks like it was a packed schedule.
No, you're absolutely right. It began with the AI Action Summit, where, of course, the Indian Prime Minister and the French President both laid out their visions for how they see artificial intelligence as absolutely crucial technology that's going to shape the future of world politics, economics, how societies function. They both laid out their vision for how they expect it to go. It was a well-received speech by the Prime Minister in terms of acknowledging both the risks but also the promise and the opportunity offered by artificial intelligence. So that was a very, very packed first day in terms of delivering for on a very, very crucial issue of global governance moving forward. Now, of course, you have the Prime Minister also, of course, going to the National Cemetery. He's also, of course, going to go and go to the ITER, where they're going to talk, of course, about nuclear fusion, and you're expecting to see some takeaways on nuclear power and further India-France cooperation on that. You're expecting to hear more about India-France cooperation on defense. That's a key takeaway that we're going to be looking for as the day goes on. And also, of course, the opening of the consulate in Marseille, which is again going to expand to India's already expanding diplomatic network around the world, which is really a remarkable development over the last decade or so that India has undertaken. So really a very packed 2-day visit, as it often is with an India-France visit. Of course, now he goes on to a challenging assignment in Washington.
So on that note, Shashank, thank you very much. And with this 6th visit of Prime Minister Modi to France, what is it that he said, especially at the CEO forum after the AI Action Summit? He also met the top tech giants, corporate giants, asking them to invest in India, that this is the right time. Let's listen into an excerpt of that.
यही समय है, सही समय है. भारत की प्रगति में सभी की प्रगति जुड़ी है. इसका एक उदाहरण एविएशन क्षेत्र में देखा गया. जब भारतीय कंपनियों ने हवाई जहाजों के लिए बड़े ऑर्डर्स दिए और अब जब हम 120 नए एयरपोर्ट्स खोलने जा रहे हैं, तो भविष्य की संभावनाओं का आप स्वयं अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं. हमने एक स्टेबल पॉलिटी और प्रिडिक्टेबल पॉलिसी, ये इकोसिस्टम स्थापित किया है. रिफॉर्म, परफॉर्म, ट्रांसफॉर्म के पथ पर चलते हुए आज भारत विश्व की 5वीं सबसे बड़ी इकोनॉमी है. विश्व की सबसे तेजी से ग्रो करने वाली मेजर इकोनॉमी है. जल्द ही दुनिया की 3री बड़ी इकोनॉमी बनने जा रहे हैं. भारत की स्किल्ड युवा टैलेंट फैक्ट्री और इनोवेशन स्पिरिट वैश्विक पटल पर हमारी पहचान है. मैं आप सबको कहता हूं कि भारत में आने का यही समय है, सही समय है. भारत की प्रगति में सभी की प्रगति जुड़ी है. मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा से जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं. जब फ्रांस की फिनेस और भारत का स्केल मिलेगा, जब भारत का पेस और फ्रांस का प्रिसिजन मिलेगा, जब फ्रांस की टेक्नोलॉजी और भारत का टैलेंट मिलेगा तो सिर्फ बिजनेस लैंडस्केप ही नहीं, ग्लोबल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन होगा।